So tonight let us chant once again the first 10 shlokas of chapter 5 of the Gita after the introductory verses. पार्थाय प्रतिबोधितां भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रथितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीमष्टादशाध्यायिनीम् अम्ब त्वामनुसन्दधामि भगवद्गीते भवद्वेषिणीम् वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुं मूकं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे परमानन्दमाधवम् ॐ अथ पञ्चमोऽध्यायः अर्जुन उवाच सन्न्यासं कर्मणां कृष्ण पुनर्योगं च शंससि यच्छ्रेययेतयोरेकं तन्मे ब्रूहि सुनिश्चितम् श्रीभगवानुवाच सन्न्यासः कर्मयोगश्च निःश्रेयसकरावुभौ तयोस्तु कर्मसन्न्यासात् कर्मयोगो विशिष्यते ज्ञेयः स नित्यसन्न्यासी यो न द्वेष्टि न काङ्क्षति निर्द्वन्द्वो हि महाबाहो सुखं बन्धात् प्रमुच्यते सांख्ययोगो पृथग् बालाः प्रवदन्ति न पण्डिताः एकमप्यास्थितः सम्यग् उभयोर्विन्दते फलम् यत्साङ्ख्यै प्राप्यते स्थानं तद्योगैरपि गम्यते एकं साङ्ख्यं च योगं च यः पश्यति स पश्यति सन्न्यासस्तु महाबाहो दुःखमाप्तुमयोगतः योगयुक्तो मुनिर्ब्रह्मा न चिरेणाधिगच्छति योगयुक्तो विशुद्धात्मा विजितात्मा जितेन्द्रियः सर्वभूतात्मभूतात्मा कुर्वन्नपि न लिप्यते नैव किञ्चित् करोमीति युक्तो मन्येत तत्त्ववित् पश्यन् शृण्वन् स्पृशन् जिघ्रन् अश्नन् गच्छन् स्वपन् श्वसन् प्रलपन् विसृजन् गृह्णन् उन्मिषन् निमिषन्नपि इन्द्रियाणीन्द्रियार्थेषु वर्तन्त इति धारयन् ब्रह्मण्याधाय कर्माणि सङ्गं त्यक्त्वा करोति यः लिप्यते न स पापेन पद्मपात्रमिवाम्भसा। So now we'll continue with our study of chapter 5 of the Gita. Last time we ended on and we discussed verse 7. So let me go back to verse 7 to go forward, because that begins another subject. 7 through 13 verses, they discuss the state of a perfected person, or of a person who has risen high, at least in the spiritual sphere. So, as we remember in the first verse, Arjuna of chapter 5, Arjuna again asks the same basic question he asked in at the beginning of chapter 3, that you at one time, sannyasam karmanam Krishna punar yogam cha shamsasi, that, O Krishna, at one moment you praise the renunciation of all work, giving up all activity, and the next moment you praise the karma yogi. So please tell me that one thing which I should do, the one thing which is best. Yat shreya etayor ekam. Tell me that one thing among these two which is best. So that was basically his same question in chapter 3. But again, he's become confused, because on the one hand, Sri Krishna will praise karma yoga and speak of the necessity of karma yoga, and the next moment he will praise the renunciation of all action, as he did in the the last half or so, or not so much, last third or last fourth of chapter 4, where he speaks of the state of one who has risen above all action. So Arjuna still is not satisfied, and so he asks basically in the same question again, tell me that one thing that I am to do. And so then Sri Krishna says in verses 2 through 6, he says basically that the two paths both lead to the highest good. And so, as I explained last time, the traditional acharyas, especially the Advaita acharyas, they said that what Sri Krishna really means is that you do karma yoga first in order to purify the mind, and then you come to the renunciation of all action once the mind is purified. And so when he says that both paths lead to the final goal, he means that karma yoga as a preliminary path and sannyasa yoga as the final path. But that is clearly not what Sri Krishna is saying. And as I explained on other occasions, the traditional acharyas, when they talk about work, karma yoga, they're generally talking about performing the Vedic rituals that were prescribed to be performed, especially the rituals that are to be done every day, and then the occasional rites also. The nitya naimitika karmas, the nitya karmas, that is the actions that you're supposed to do nitya every day. And the naimitika karmas, the special actions that are to be done for special occasions and for special purposes. So the Advaita acharyas, especially all of the acharyas, the devotional acharyas, the dualist, qualified monist, and the Advaita acharyas, they all take karma yoga to mean performing one's ritual duties. And also following the law books, the ancient law books of Manu and others, as far as your social duties. But as Swami Tapasyanandaji points out in his translation of the Gita, the acharyas practically forgot about the social duties. They don't discuss those. They talk mainly about one's ritual duties and how one, following the path of knowledge, has to give all of those up. You can't combine knowledge and action, so you have to give up your ritual duties. But Sri Krishna rarely speaks in the Gita of action in the sense of ritual. In chapter 2, for some verses, he criticizes the Vedic rituals and says that they only lead to heavenly worlds of enjoyment, but not to enlightenment. And then he, in a few verses in chapter 3, starting around verse 10, I think, or 10. for several verses, he praises the ritual actions. So in chapter 2, he criticizes them. In chapter 3, he shows the place for them, but it's not the final place. And so Sri Krishna doesn't, and the rest of the Gita, there's practically no mention of work as Vedic ritual. So Sri Krishna emphasizes in the Gita, as does the whole of the Mahabharata, one's social duties. And so he says, and it's clear in the language of the Gita, unless you begin to twist things in order to make the Gita fit your philosophy, it's clear that he's saying that through the proper performance of one's ordinary daily duties, that one can attain to the highest, and that is what one should do. He says that yes, through complete renunciation of action, like the traditional sannyasis do, that also leads to the highest good, but he says dukkam aptum yogataha, but that is difficult to attain without the help of karma yoga. So again, the Gita deviates from what the traditional acharyas said that the Gita says, or actually the Gita doesn't deviate. It was there before the acharyas came along. They deviate from what the Gita says. And so Swami Vivekananda, again in the modern age, he again re-emphasized what the Gita already emphasized thousands of years ago. And it's interesting that Josephine MacLeod, whom some of you have heard about, maybe some of you have read her biography, a wonderful biography, 2 biographies written, one by one of our devotees in Kansas City and one by one of our American nuns in India, Prabuddha Prana, that when she first heard Swami Vivekananda speak in New York, she went in with her sister and brother-in-law, Betty, at that time it wasn't yet brother-in-law, Mr. Leggett, who was seeing his sister, and so they all went to hear Swamiji. She sat in the front row, and she said when Swamiji came out and began to speak, in her reminiscences, she tells about how the first word he spoke was truth, and then the second word he spoke was truth. The third word he spoke was truth, and she followed him for 7 years around the world, and every word she heard him speak was the truth. But in a letter, she says, what's not in her reminiscences, that when she saw Swamiji begin to speak, that she no longer saw Swamiji, but she saw Sri Krishna standing before the audience. So you wonder, how did this American woman, a high society woman, Josephine MacLeod, have a vision of Sri Krishna? That's improbable. But no, as she has clearly stated in other places, before she met Swamiji, she had studied the Bhagavad Gita and had committed some of it to memory. What was the name of that first translation that was popularized in the late 1800s? Chatterjee, Mohini Mohan, no, I forget now. But there was we used to have in Chicago, I don't know that it's still there, but there was a copy of the Bhagavad Gita of that translation, published in 1896, signed by Swami Trigunatitanandaji. It was his personal copy that somehow came from San Francisco to Chicago. So anyway, Josephine MacLeod knew that translation, had studied it, then met Swamiji. And when he began to speak, the appearance of Swamiji completely was melted into the form of Sri Krishna teaching Arjuna. And so she heard that first lecture, as it were, in a state of ecstasy as Swamiji spoke. So Swamiji, we often think of Sri Ramakrishna as he who is Rama and he who is Krishna has come again as Sri Ramakrishna. But Swamiji also was the mouthpiece of the ancient message of Sri Krishna. So, verse 7, back to what I was saying. Verse 2 through 6, Sri Krishna begins to answer his question by saying that the two are the same, but that it's difficult to attain to worklessness except through this practice of karma yoga. And then starting here in verse 7, he begins to talk of the person who has become self-controlled through the practice of action, through karma yoga. So he says, Yoga yukto vishuddhatma vijitatma jitendriyaha sarva bhutatma bhutatma kurvan apina lipyate. So yoga yukto, the person who is joined to yoga, the person who is engaged in yoga, who is practicing yoga, that is, again, in the Gita, that is karma yoga. Vishuddhatma, whose mind has become pure through that practice. So the person who has become joined to yoga, engaged in yoga, whose mind has become pure through that practice. Vijitatma, here atma means the body, whose body has become controlled, who has control of the body. Jitendriyaha, and whose sense organs have been conquered. That is, in the ordinary person, the senses do what they want to do, and we run along behind the senses. The senses want to see something, and we're pulled along to look. Senses want to hear something, and we're pulled along to go hear what is there. The senses smell something, and we're pulled along to see what the smell is. So that doesn't mean that seeing, hearing, smelling, etc. are bad, and that we shouldn't do any of those things. It means that we shouldn't be under their control. We should look when we want to look, when there's a purpose in looking. We should hear when there's a purpose in hearing. We should smell when there's a purpose in smelling. That is, the senses should be under my control and not me running after the senses. We naturally think that I am in control. I'm in control of my mind. I'm in control of my body. I'm in control of my senses. Of course I am. I do what I want to do. I look when I want to look. I hear when I want to hear. No, you try to stop. Then you see that you're not under control at all. As soon as you try to exert control, you find, no, the senses and the body and the mind are in control. You, the decider, to use a recently coined phrase in the previous president's administration, you, the decider, are not deciding. It's the senses and the body and mind that are deciding, and you are running along behind them. That's the experience of anyone who tries to meditate. That, okay, now just focus on this simple thing and don't think of anything else. And you find that that's impossible to do, impossible to do. The mind runs all over the place, falls asleep, etc. No, that's because we are not jitendriya, not jitatma, and not vishuddhatma. The mind is not pure, the body is not under control, and the senses have not been conquered. But one who is engaged in yoga, who is purified in mind, who has control of the body and control of the senses, sarva bhutatma bhutatma. And as I said last time, I don't care for the great Madhusudana Saraswati. He was a great, great saint and philosopher, but I don't care for his translation of that or his interpretation of that, not translation. He interpreted it in Sanskrit. So the clear meaning of sarva bhutatma bhutatma, without trying to bring in strange meanings for the individual words, is whose atma has become bhuta, whose atma has become sarva bhuta atma. This sarva bhuta atma, the self, the atma of sarva bhuta, of all beings. So his self has, bhutatma, has become the self of all beings. So he's identified with the self of all beings. So kurvannapi na lipyate, even doing action, he's not tainted by the action. And as I explained last time, tainted by the action because we do something and it affects our mind. We do something and we're not free of the action. We do something and then we worry about it, we think about it. Did it come out right? Was anybody looking when I did it? Is somebody going to praise me? Is somebody going to blame me? What are people going to think about what I did? What is it going to cost me? How am I going to pay for it? What complications? So the mind just gets so involved, even small things that we do. We go out to get an ice cream cone and we get on the road, we're driving and we're thinking this will just take 5 minutes. I'll drive down to Walgreens, I'll get an ice cream cone, I'll come back and I'll be happy. And we get out and find that there's an accident on the road and we can't move for 45 minutes. And so everything, our whole day has changed because of a simple thing like that. Again, that doesn't mean that going out for an ice cream cone is bad. It just means that action tends to complicate. And it does affect the mind. But a person whose mind has become pure, who is in control of the body and control of the senses, and who sees himself as identified with all beings, with the self of all beings, such a person, even doing action, is unaffected by it, because the mind remains pure and calm. Swami Tapasyanandaji, again, in his Swami Tapasyanandaji is one of the best translations, I have to say. I knew Swami Tapasyanandaji, was very devoted to him, very fond of him, and his Gita translation is one of the best. The only thing I don't like about his translation is not the translation, but there's an editorial decision. They put his comments on the verses at the end of each chapter. So you read the verse, and then you've got to go back several pages and see what notes are there, and then you come back and read another verse, and you have to go back and look at the notes instead of having everything along with the translation. But it's an excellent translation. And so he says that, and it's a very plausible argument, true to experience, that here Sri Krishna is not talking about the person who has attained to the highest, but that there is an intermediate state where a person begins to feel themselves identified with all beings. You see something of that in a Mahatma Gandhi. Of course, people who, in their enthusiasm of devotion for Mahatma Gandhi, for his greatness and everything, they wanted to make him an avatara and so forth. Oh, no, Mahatma Gandhi wasn't an avatara of God, and he didn't claim to be a realized soul. He had developed spiritually. He was a very good man, a pure mind, and had advanced in the spiritual path, but he was a spiritual aspirant, as he himself claimed. He never claimed anything more than that. He saw himself as identified with humanity, and it was that which drove him to do the things that he did. Whether one likes his politics or not, or whether one thinks that there were mistakes that he made that affected India in a bad way or not, that's something open to debate. But the man himself, you have to appreciate the greatness of the man, the greatness of his dedication, and the fact that he saw himself identified with others. Otherwise, how could he have done what he did? How could he have sacrificed what he sacrificed in order to help others? The same thing you can see, maybe not to the same extent, but to a great extent, and a very admirable extent, you see in Martin Luther King, that he identified first with the struggles of his own people, with the African American community, identified with them. And then as his life progressed, he saw his identification much bigger. He began to identify with everyone. He began to feel the pain of everyone, and began to identify with poverty wherever it was seen, and suffering wherever it was seen. And so that was what made him such a power also. It was that which made Gandhiji such a power. And so there is an intermediate state where one begins to feel identified with humanity, or with the whole world, not just humanity. One can be identified with the larger world of all beings, and even identified with so-called material things. And so that is Sarva Bhutatma, one who has begun to feel their being to be one with the being of the universe. They haven't yet necessarily realized the highest, but they've come to an intermediate state where they begin to feel this identification with all, where the sufferings of others they see as their own sufferings, the problems of others they see as their own problems. And so the translation given here is, he who is associated with yoga, pure in mind, controlled in body, a conqueror of the organs, and whose real nature consists in being all the things and the self, or as I would say, and as Swami Tapasyananda I found out this evening says, whose being has become identified with all beings, does not become tainted even while performing actions. That is, the mind is not affected. The mind is unaffected by action. Swami Vivekananda was very strong on this idea of not being affected by action, learning to act in such a way that the mind is not affected. He said, spit out your actions. Don't think about them. Once you've done something, don't think about it. What we tend to do is we do something and then we keep mulling over, did I do it right? Did I do it wrong? part of that, a little bit of that is good because we're trying to learn from it. We're trying to learn, see what we can learn from our action. But most of it is not trying to learn. Most of it is just worry. It's just going over again and again and again the same thing because we can't let it go. And so Swamiji said, spit out your actions. Don't think about them once you have done them. In his characteristically strong way, he said, don't repent. Spit if you must, but don't repent. So what did he mean? He didn't mean that if you do something wrong, you shouldn't learn from it, and you shouldn't know that, okay, I did that, that shouldn't have been done, I will try not to do it again. But what he meant is that mulling over things. We do something, and for the next 50 years, we go on thinking, why did I say that stupid thing? Nobody else remembers we even said it, and yet we're still thinking, why did I say that stupid thing 50 years ago? That was so foolish. Why did I do that stupid thing 45 years ago? It was so foolish. Nobody else even knows that we did it. And yet 45 years later, we're still thinking, why did I do that? Why did I do that? So spit out your actions, as Swamiji said. And so, and that's an attempt to come to the state where you're not affected by your actions. Kurvannapi na lipyate. Even doing your actions, you're not affected by them. So again, none of these things should be misunderstood. That doesn't mean that do whatever you like and don't care about the consequences. Who cares for consequences? I'll do whatever I want to do. No, it doesn't mean that. If you do that, you're going to suffer from the consequences for your actions. But it means that when you're doing the best that you know how to do, that's all that's expected of any of us, to do the best that we know how to do. When you're trying to do that, then just spit out your actions. Let them go. If you made a mistake, then learn from it quickly and then let it go. Let it go. What you want is the learning from the experience, not to go on worrying about it. Why did I do it? Why? By doing that, what good do you do yourself? None. You only drive deeper and deeper into the mind the bad effect of what you did. So don't do that. So then verses 8 and 9, Madhusudana takes together, and actually they go together. It's a good reason why he does. So let's chant the two verses. Naiva kinchit karomiti yukto manyeta tattvavit Pashyan shrinvan sprishan jigran ashnan gachan swapang shwasan pralapan visrajan grihnan unmishan nimishan api indriyani indriyartheshu vartanta iti dharayan. So if you can get through those two verses without hesitation, then your Devanagari recitation is very good. It's two verses of a tongue twister. So naiva kinchit karomi. Kinchit na eva karomi. I don't do anything. I indeed don't do any. I do absolutely nothing. Iti yukto manyeta tattvavit. Thus the knower of the truth thinks. The knower of the truth knows that I don't do anything. And that I've explained many times, how we don't really, that the ego says, oh, I am the doer. And we suffer the consequences because we think that I am the doer for things, but I don't know what I'm doing. Just the body and mind are doing things, and so the tattvavit, the knower of the truth, knows that it's prakriti, that is, it's nature, the nature that is acting through the body and mind. And I am the conscious self. I am the witness who illumines that which is happening. But I don't know how I speak. I don't know how I walk. I don't know how I make decisions. I don't know any of that. So, knowing that, understanding that, let me try, it's a practice, try to think of myself as consciousness, the light which illumines all of my experience. But I'm not the experience itself. I'm the light which illumines the experience. So the actions of the body and mind are happening in the light of myself, the consciousness which I am. All of that is taking place, but I'm the consciousness. I'm not the actions. I'm not the doer. The ego, as I've said, is an imposter, which takes credit for that which it has no right to credit for. Thinking that it does things. So the tattvavit, the knower of truth, who is yukta, who is controlled, whose mind is absorbed in yoga. Naiva kinchit karomiti. I don't do anything at all. I do nothing at all. Thus he thinks. Pashyan, seeing, Shrinvan, hearing, Sparshan, touching, Jigran, smelling, Ashnan, eating, Gachan, walking, Swapang, sleeping, Shwasan, breathing. So in the midst of all of these actions, he doesn't think that I'm doing anything. I'm doing nothing in the midst of all of these actions. These actions are going on by the gunas of Prakriti, by the qualities of Prakriti, by the dynamics of Prakriti, of nature. And then pralapan, speaking, visrajan, that is eliminating, grihnan, grasping, unmishan, nimishan, opening and closing the eyes, api, even opening and closing the eyes. He doesn't think that I am doing that. In the Ashtavakra Samhita, I forget now whether it's Ashtavakra or Janaka, his disciple, who says that to the knower of the truth, even taking responsibility for opening and closing the eyes, for blinking the eyes, is an unbearable assumption of responsibility. Even blinking the eyes is an unbearable assumption of responsibility to the knower of the truth. That is, the blinking happens, I have nothing to do with it. I'm the light in which it happens. I have nothing to do with it. I'm the light in which everything happens, but I'm not the doer. I'm the light which illumines. So indriyan indriyartheshu vartante iti dharayan. Iti dharayan, thus thinking that the senses the senses are resting in their or operating in their objects. So the Tattvavit, the knower of the truth, realizes that yes, the eyes, the ears, they're all falling on and registering the objects of the senses. The eyes are seeing sights, the ears are hearing sounds, the nose is smelling smells, the hand is grasping objects, the feet are moving, locomotion, etc. The voice is speaking. All of that is happening, but that's just the sense organs of knowledge and organs of action, the 10 sense organs as Hinduism defines them, are just following their objects. But I'm the light which illumines all of that. I'm not involved in that. So, of course, this is speaking from the standpoint of the jnani, the standpoint of the knower of truth. The bhakta doesn't generally start with this. The bhakta starts with the idea that this individual self, this jiva who's endowed with a body and mind and sense organs, I use my body and mind to serve God and to worship God. And all of this philosophy I don't need to bother my head with. But for the jnani, this is the path of the one following the path of knowledge. And this is, so in the Gita you find all of the paths discussed. The path of knowledge is very beautifully discussed in the Gita, including in this chapter. The path of devotion is beautifully described, and it's concentrated in chapter 12, but it's through a number of chapters, the path of devotion. The next chapter we come to, chapter 6, the path of meditation, Raja Yoga. And then Karma Yoga, all through the Gita you find it described. So a beautiful harmony of the yogas embodied in the Bhagavad Gita. And that's one of the reasons why the Gita has been the most popular of the scriptures in the Hindu tradition. There's so many scriptures. There's not one Bible or one Quran in Hinduism. They're the Vedas. But then there are all sorts of scriptures that came after the Vedas. But of all of them, including even the Vedas, the Gita is the most popular of all. And that's partly because the vision is so comprehensive. Everyone can find something for themselves in the Gita. It doesn't exclude anything. So as the translation here goes, one whose mind is absorbed in the self, that is yupta, who is a knower of reality, tattvavit, thinks thus, manyeta. I certainly do not do anything, even while seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, moving, sleeping, breathing, speaking, ejecting, grasping, opening and closing the eyes, knowing for certain that the organs function in relation to the objects of the organs. That's all that's happening. And I am the light which is free. All of our trouble comes because we have identified ourselves as the object perceived by consciousness. I am the body. And so when the body suffers, I suffer. I am the mind. So when the mind is restless, I feel I am restless. When the mind is depressed, I feel I am depressed. No, I am the light which illumines all of that. And once I can experience that, then I'm on my way towards the ability to dissociate at will, so that I can stand as consciousness itself. So you see, like in the life of Sri Ramakrishna, in the lives of the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna as well, and Swami Vivekananda, the Holy Mother, and the disciples. But in Sri Ramakrishna also you see that ability, so that when he had cancer of the throat, when he could hardly eat, he could hardly swallow, such an extremely painful condition, in days when they didn't have pain care medication, they didn't have palliative care for extreme pain. So it was an extremely painful condition that he was suffering from. And so one day Sri Ramakrishna, as we see him doing often with his disciples, he went to Hari, that is later Swami Turiyananda, and said, "Oh, you see, I'm suffering so much with this sore in my throat. I'm suffering so terribly." And then Swami Turiyananda said, "But I see that you're not suffering, that you are ever immersed in the ocean of bliss." And Sri Ramakrishna chuckled and said, "Yes, you have found me out." So yes, he was able to transcend all of that suffering. So that may be beyond us now. Not maybe, it is beyond us now. But if we begin to have this, if we begin to internalize this idea, and we begin to think of it, and begin to feel that, yes, I can understand it, I can even see that it's true, though I can't act on it yet, but I can see that it's true, that I am the light of experience, I'm not the body, not the mind, then we've put a wedge between the body and mind and our sense of identity. So that when I feel depressed, I can think that, well, the mind is depressed. That's not me. Let me remember that's not me. When we have pain, we can think that, yes, I experience the pain, and the pain still hurts as pain, but I can see it as an object. I'm not the pain. It's in the body. Let me try to remain as the witness, as the consciousness, which illumines it, but is not the pain itself. And so in that way, we gradually begin to put a wedge of separation between ourselves and that which we experience through the body and mind. That I am the light which illumines, not that which is illuminated. So one whose mind is absorbed in the self and is a knower of reality knows that. So then verse 10 says, Brahmanyadhaya karmani sangam tyaktva karoti yaha lipyate na sapapena padmapatram bhasa. So this is a very beautiful verse, that one who acts by dedicating actions, brahmanyadhaya karmani sangam tyaktva karoti who sangam tyaktva, having renounced attachment to the fruits of action, and brahmanyadhaya, and has surrendered actions into Brahman, karmani karoti, and does actions. So one who acts by dedicating actions to Brahman and by renouncing attachment, lipyate nasapapena, he's not touched by sin. Padma patram ivambhasa, the beautiful image which is traditional in Hinduism, that is like the lotus leaf, which water falls on the lotus leaf, but the lotus leaf remains dry. The water beads up and rolls off. You take water from the lake and splash it on the lotus leaf, and it beads up and rolls off of the leaf. So the leaf is living in water. It's nourished by water. It's supported by water, and yet water doesn't touch it. And so the sage who has attained to this state, which again is not the highest state, this is talking about an elevated state, no doubt, but a state on the way towards the highest. such a one is untouched by sin. They've come to the point where their actions no longer affect the mind, where they no longer are able to do unworthy things. Because the mind has become pure, and because the unconscious mind and the subconscious mind have become purified. So even for such a person, a fall is still possible. It's only when one attains to the highest that then one is liberated forever. But at this state, even if one has a fall, and the scriptures and the Puranas are full of such examples, then the person again comes back to the same state after some time and again continues to go forward. And so even at this state, nothing is lost forever. If one has come to this state, then yes, one may, because of past karma or whatever, or because of a hidden samskara in the mind, something may come up. The person may do something that makes them fall backwards. But after experiencing the karma of that action and whatever it involves and so forth, the time will come when again they will realize that no, let me go back to where I was. And quickly they ascend to the state and continue going forward. So one who acts by dedicating actions to Brahman and by renouncing attachment, he does not become polluted by sin, just as a lotus leaf is not by water. And again, after coming to the highest, then the very possibility is destroyed. Then one remains in a state of identification with the highest, where ignorance is no longer possible. One has become light itself. And when one is light itself, then where is darkness? Where is the possibility of darkness? There's no possibility of darkness. So that's what we're aiming towards, but we go towards it step by step. We go towards it step by step. First by struggling what in the Christian world was called the via purgativa, the path of purgation, that is the path of purification. And so through meditation, through spiritual practice, through worship, through thinking spiritual thoughts, gradually the mind and the heart become purified. Gradually our instincts become better and better. And the unconscious mind is not pushing us in contrary directions. The unconscious mind begins to push us in the right direction. That is the direction we want to go, the direction that is self-motivated. That I see that there is a goal ahead of me and I know that that's what I want. And so now my whole mind is pushing me in that direction. Then it's just a question of time. That's why the beautiful concept in Buddhism, from the Buddha himself, taught by the Buddha himself, of the Shrotapanna, one who has entered the stream enterer. And so the Buddha said that one who has entered the stream, that is, they have progressed enough on the spiritual path so that they begin to feel that they're being carried forward by a current. That current is the support of their own unconscious mind. Their own unconscious mind is no longer rebelling, trying to push them in a different direction, but now it's supporting and pushing them forward. Then it's just a question of time. I think it was said in the Buddhist tradition that at the most after 3 more lifetimes one will attain to the highest realization once one has begun to feel that they're being pushed forward in the path due to the state of their own mind. So again, this also is speaking of a similar state. In verse 11, it says, Kayena manasa buddhya kevalairindriyairapi yoginah karma kurvanti sangam tyaktvatma shuddhaye. For those of you who have this book, there's a misprint in this, the Sanskrit of this verse. The third word, buddhya, it should be at the end of buddhya, not buddhya, but buddhya. So kayena manasa buddhya kevalaya indriyairapi yogina karma kurvanti. Yogina, the yogins, that is karma yogins, karma kurvanti, perform action Sangam tyaktva, having renounced attachment to the fruits of actions. That is, they do that which is in front of them to do because it's there to be done, and because there's no avoiding action. Understanding what he said in the second chapter, that everyone is forced to act every minute. There's no avoiding action, even for a moment. Oh no, in chapter 3, the beginning of chapter 3, that no one can be without work even for a moment. So understanding that, one who does action because it's there to be done, but does it without attachment to the fruits, doing it just because it's there to be done, and it's a means for me to liberate myself. By avoiding the action, I'm only hurting myself. By doing it with attachment, I'm hurting myself in another way. Not as bad as avoiding it, but still getting involved in the action. But doing it because it's there to be done, and because every action has the possibility, as Swamiji says in Karma Yoga, to strike fire from the soul, to awaken the soul. And so I do action because of that, because it has the power to strike the fire from the soul. It has the power to draw knowledge out of the soul. It has the power to manifest the divinity of the soul. So I do action because of that, not because I want some little baubles that are purchased by doing the action. No, I do it because of that. And so such a person, the yogis, doing action, having renounced attachment, for the purification of the mind, Atma Shuddhiye, for the purification of the mind, Kayena Manasa Buddhya, doing action by the body, by the mind, and by the buddhi. That is translated as intellect usually, but intellect is a very poor translation because it doesn't mean what we think of as intellect, but the intuitive part of the mind. Kevalayar Indriyayar Indriyayar, and by the senses, Kevalayar. Only they do work only by the senses, by the buddhi, by the mind, and by the body, but not by identification. I'm not doing it. It's only by the senses, by the mind, by the body, by the sense organs. So by giving up attachment, the yogis undertake work through mere body, mind, intellect, and even the organs for the purification of their minds. So that's why they engage in action, for purification of the mind. And again, why? Why do anything? Because we all have motivation behind every action that we do. We don't do anything without some motivation. But our motivations are small motivations. I want some little thing, and so I do some little thing to get some little thing. The yogin may do the same action, but again, they gradually, step by step, train themselves to do action because this needs to be done, and so I do it. But I do it because it leads to purification of the mind. Not doing it will lead to complication. Doing it because I want some little thing, that will lead to complication. But let me go through life doing that which is required of me. But because I give myself to do it, not as a slave. That has to be understood. That's what Swamiji meant when he said that duty is the midday summer sun which scorches the very life of humanity. In other places, Swamiji said that duty is the means to rise by doing your duty. So he's saying two contradictory things. So when the same person who's a great intelligent person says two contradictory things, we have to look for what the apparent contradiction is, and then we see that no, it's only apparent, the contradiction. So Swamiji, when he says by doing duty, that's the way we rise, he means doing that which is in front of you to be done. Do it. But the sense of duty is what he said, that's this midday summer sun which scorches the very life out of us. The sense that I have to do this because it's my duty. I have to do it. That's, Swamiji said, that's working as a slave. He says, give what you have to give to the world. That which the world requires of you, give it. But give it because you want to give it and be done with it. Not because you're a slave. Not because, oh my God, I've got to do this and I hate doing this, and but I've got to do it. What are people going to say if I don't do it? And everybody is expecting it from me, and I owe it to people, but I hate doing it. No. Just do it because it's there to be done. Don't work as a slave. Work as a free agent. I remember reading years ago a book called Zen in English Literature and Oriental Classics. Very interesting book, written back in the 1950s, I think, or maybe even in the 40s or 50s, probably the 50s. Anyway, the author, an Englishman who had lived in Japan for many years, he gave an example. Said that you're lying in bed and you're trying to sleep, and suddenly you hear the cow meowing, and the cat wants to get out. And you know that the cat is not going to stop from meowing, but you lie there in bed just wishing, the cat just shut up. I don't want to get up. I don't want to get up. I don't want to get up. If I get up, I'm not going to be able to sleep again. Oh, I hate this. And finally, after a long time, you finally get out of bed and you let the cat out. Well, you know from the beginning that that's going to happen. So just go up and let the cat out. But don't lie there thinking for half an hour that, oh my God, the cat's meowing again. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. Let me just try to ignore it. No, I can't ignore it, but I'm still going to try. No, just get up and let the cat out and be done with it. So like that with all of our actions, that which is required of you, then do it. But do it because you are doing it freely. Yes, I see that is there for me to be done, so I do it. Okay, finished. So by giving up attachment, the yogins undertake work through mere body, mind, intellect, and even the organs for the purification of their minds. So then verse 12 says, Yukta karma phalam tyaktva shantim apnoti naishtikim ayukta kama karena phale sakto nibadhyate. So yukta, that is one who is self-controlled, one who is engaged in yoga, or one who is self-controlled. And of course they come to the same thing, just a different way of approaching the same thing. Karma phalam tyaktva, having renounced the fruits of action. Karma phalam, the fruits of action, tyaktva, having given them up. Shantim apnoti, attains to peace. What kind of peace? Peace, naishtikim, the eternal and unwavering peace. Naishtikim, shantim, naishtikim, shantim. So having the one who is self-controlled and who has given up the results of action attains to constant peace, unwavering peace. Yukta, the one who is not self-controlled, the one who is not engaged in yoga, in karma yoga, kama karena, caused by desire, by the force of desire, phale sakto nibadhyate, becomes attached to the fruits of action and thus is bound. So the person who is not performing karma yoga, who is acting without the science of karma yoga, becomes attached to the fruits of action because of desire, because I want this, I want that, I want the other thing, and thus becomes bound. So as I've said on other occasions, in other contexts, it's not that you can say, okay, well, I'm not going to desire anything, because then the mind just fills with all kinds of irresistible desires. So you don't work with desire by saying, I'm going to deny it, I'm not going to deny anything. No, that doesn't work. But you work on it by moving in the opposite direction. That is, the mind has to have some object. The mind has to have some purpose. The mind has to have some orientation. Just as the inchworm comes to the end of a leaf, and then it looks around for something else to attach to it. Swings and swings and swings until finally over here it finds another leaf. Then it attaches itself there, and then it can come over here and start going on that leaf. But it can't leave this leaf until it finds something else. And so the mind can't leave its attachments until it finds something else to attach itself to. And so that should be our goal, not getting rid of desire. Of course, you can simplify. That everybody can do. Just simplify your desires and realize there are not so many things I need. And when something comes up which you don't really need, just think, well, I don't really need that. Why do I, as the mind going after that, I don't really need it. But again, you can only go so far that way. But what we really need is to find the other leaf to attach to, and that either by attaching ourselves to God, or attaching ourselves to spiritual practice, or attaching ourselves to the desire for a spiritual state, then gradually that becomes more attractive. That takes time. That's a lifetime struggle. But gradually that becomes more attractive, and the other things begin to leave us behind. As Sri Ramakrishna said, if you want to get away from the East, then just go towards the West, and the East is already leaving you behind. You don't have to say, oh, I want to get away from the East. How do I get away from the East? No, forget about the East. Just go towards the West. So by renouncing the result of work, one who is engaged in karma yoga attains constant peace. One who is not engaged in karma yoga, being attached to the result under the impulsion of desire, becomes completely bound. Nibadhyate. Badhyate, bound. Nibadhyate, completely bound. So such a one becomes completely bound. So let's take one more verse, and and then we'll come to a somewhat different topic. This verse 13 says, "Sarva karmani manasa sanyasyaste sukham vashi navadvare pure dehi naiva kurvanna karayan." Sarva karmani manasa sanyasyaste sukham vashi. So the vashi, the person who is self-controlled, sarva karmani sanyasya, the person who has self-controlled, who has given up all actions, manasa, by the mind. So not giving up action in the sense of the traditional Advaitins, where you don't do anything except for beg for your food, but otherwise you sit around all day trying to meditate, but most people are not, even sannyasis are not capable of doing that. So you've given up actions mentally. That is, you've given up the sense that I am the doer of the action. No, I either by surrendering to God, oh, Mother, you are the doer of everything. I am only the instrument. You do everything. Let me be your instrument. Or I am consciousness itself. I'm not the doer. I surrender the sense of the agent of action into the light of the self. So one way or the other. So having given up all actions mentally, the man of self-control remains happily, sukham aste, remains happily in the body of navadvare pure dehi, remains in the body of 9 gates without doing or causing others to do anything at all. Naiva kurvan nakarayan, not doing anything, nor karyan, not causing others to do anything. So the dehi, the embodied person, who navadvare pure, who dwells in the body of 9 gates, that is the orifices of the body, which were considered to be 9 in number. In the city of 9 gates. So this body is the city of 9 gates. And so the Dehi, the embodied soul sitting within that, who is Vashi, self-controlled, and who sarva karmani manasa sanyasya, has renounced all actions with the mind, aste sukham aste, and who is seated happily. Such a one neither does any action nor causes others to do action. Why? Because he has no sense of being the agent. No sense of being the agent. So you see someone like Ramana Maharshi, a great realized soul of the 20th century, 19th and 20th centuries, one of those who was universally regarded as a fully illumined soul. As there are those saints that people have doubts about whether they were or were not, but some, like Ramakrishna and Ramana Maharshi, they were universally regarded as people of the highest realization. So Ramana Maharshi, he would engage people in work. He would tell people to go to the kitchen to cut vegetables. His disciple Annamalai Swami he never let him sit for meditation. He would always engage him in construction work. Go and do this, go and do that. Never sat in meditation, but was always engaged in work. And so you say, well, there's Ramana Maharshi. He was always engaging people in work. So how could this be true? But no, he had no sense of that. He had no sense of engaging others in work. But his engaging others, the apparent engaging others in work, that was done for the welfare of others. But he didn't even have the sense of identity with that. That just happened. It wasn't that I am engaging Annamalaya Swami in all of this work. No. Ramana Maharshi had the sense that I do nothing. I am the witness, the universal consciousness in which this whole universe appears. I do nothing. Just watch the world happening. There's a beautiful incident which is mystifying, but very beautiful if we understand it, which I've told before, probably not in this class, but in lectures or something. There was a woman that Ramana Maharshi, one morning, he scolded her for something. And of course, not a serious scolding. Ramana Maharshi never got red in the face and shouted at people, but he corrected a woman for doing something. And so she went on stewing about it all day. Why did he tell me that? I wasn't doing anything wrong. I didn't mean to do anything wrong. Why did he correct me like that in front of everybody? So the whole day she was stewing about it. So in the evening, she couldn't stand it anymore. So she came to Ramana Maharshi and said, Sir, why did you correct me this morning? I didn't mean to do anything wrong. And Ramana Maharshi said, why do you blame me for what you see in your own dream? Now, if I said that to you, you could say, Swami, I saw you and everybody saw you scolding me. But for Ramana Maharshi, no, he had no sense of being an agent of any action. He saw that all of that was within her own dream. That was her own perception. That he scolded no one. That he was consciousness itself. That what she saw was the perceptual universe of her own doing. And he had nothing to do with it. So that is possible for a Ramana Maharshi or someone who has attained to that. So such a one doesn't do anything, nor does such a one cause anyone else to do anything. So we'll stop here for tonight. And next week we will take up verse 14 in chapter 5. So let me see if there's any one or two questions. Yes, Jayanta. Here, Jayanta up in the front. Oh, yeah. Yes.
The confusion about 8 and 9. Suppose eating, breathing, not the eating, the breathing or closing the eyelids and all, or smelling. Those are involuntary action, like physiological action. And that is controlled mostly by the vital energy, right?
Yes.
So when suppose somebody is in coma, he doesn't have any consciousness or anything, but still those things are functioning automatically, right? So,
yes.
So which one is this, like when you are saying that it's not that I am controlling or I am doing anything?
When it's happening by automatic nervous responses, then it's easier to realize that I'm not doing it, because I've been breathing the whole time I'm giving the class, but I wasn't thinking about, okay, now I got an inhale. Okay, now I got to exhale. Like that. No, I wasn't thinking about it. It was just going on. But I still think that I am breathing. Now, my eyelids are blinking from time to time to keep the eyes moist and clear from dust and so forth. But I'm not thinking about it. It's just happening. But still, if you ask me, I said, oh, yes, I was blinking the whole time. I still take responsibility for it. Now, the person in coma, that doesn't apply, because they're not taking responsibility for those physical actions, because they're not aware of them. And so there, that is not there. If there's mental activity going on in the person in coma, sometimes sometimes they're in a vegetative state where there's no mental activity. But if there's mental activity, then they have the sense that I am thinking. And if they have the sense that I am thinking, then they're taking responsibility for their thoughts. But the physical actions they're not taking responsibility for, because they have no awareness of them. They have no ability. Or a person in paralysis, like when I fell on the bicycle and broke my hip. When the EMT people came, they of course asked me, can you wiggle your toes? Because they wanted to see if I'd injured the spine and if I was paralyzed. And yes, I could wiggle my toes. I wasn't paralyzed or anything. But if I'd been paralyzed, or someone who is paralyzed, then they don't have the sense of control over that. So that's there. So that doesn't change anything. The sense is that I should not think that I am the one responsible for blinking. I'm not the one responsible for digesting. I'm not the one responsible for things that I have more participatory agentship of, where I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. All those things also, just like my blinking and digesting, which normally I'm not thinking about, they just go on by themselves. So my other actions also are just going on by themselves, but the ego attaches itself to them and takes responsibility. Is that clear? Okay, good. Yes, here's a question over here. So to give her the microphone, Jayanta, you can just hand it to her, yes.
So my question goes back to, where you talked about not mulling over things that are done already.
Yes.
And you talked about, and I was kind of equating that with reflection versus mulling.
Yes.
So how do you, intentionally, or is there a process that you can stop yourself from mulling and doing constructive reflection?
Yes.
Learn from.
Yes, it's not something that's automatic, that you flip a switch and suddenly you're not doing it anymore, but it can be done gradually. So first, the distinction between the two, reflecting and then mulling, because you made a very good distinction. There is a distinction. For instance, Holy Mother, she said that every day in the evening it's good to spend a few moments thinking over the day and learning from your experiences. What did I do right? What did I do wrong? What can I do better? And so forth. So that's not mulling, that's reflecting and trying to learn from my experience. Why do I keep repeating the same mistake over and over again? Because I don't learn from it. So reflecting is good. But then when I start thinking, oh my God, why did I do that? That was so stupid, and feeling guilty and getting depressed because I did something and worrying about what people are thinking about me and all of that, then that of course is mulling. So the distinction is obvious. Sometimes we're not sure which we're doing because there's always a gray area between any two distinctions. But in general, reflecting is learning from something with a positive, neutral frame, not a non-judgmental frame of mind. And mulling is with a judgmental frame of mind, judging myself and worrying and all of that. So how to get over the mulling part? This first step, as in so many problems, is just recognizing it, recognizing what I'm doing, and recognizing by observing myself. Self-observation is a very good habit to make, because by observing myself, I see that I'm not doing myself any good. I get myself into a bad state of mind by mulling over things, and it just goes on and on and on, and it hasn't resolved anything. So first, understanding that the mulling does me no good, I don't want to do that. And then the way to get out of it, which again is a practice, it is not like flipping a switch, but something that you have to do over and over and keep trying to do, is to just, there's several things you can do. One thing is to realize what I'm doing, and if you're devotional by nature, say, "Oh Mother," "Oh my Lord," or whatever my concept of God is. I'll use Mother. "Oh Mother, I'm mulling over things again. Please take that away from me. Let me think of you. That does me no good. Let me think of you, or let me think of something good." So recognizing what's happening and then diverting the mind, either through prayer if you have a devotional attitude, or to a positive thought, or a meditative thought or something. That's the only secret, is a diversion of the mind. But not one thing we always have to remember in spiritual life is that what we don't want is repression, because repression is, I don't want to look at it. I don't want to look at it. Get it out of my sight, get it out of my sight. We're pushing it down into the unconscious mind. But things we push like that out of fear into the unconscious mind, they don't go away. They sit in there and rot and cause other problems. So we don't want to push things into the unconscious out of fear that I don't want to look at it. No, let me see what I'm doing. I don't need to be afraid of it. I'm just mulling things over and it's not doing me any good. So let me think of something positive. That's all. Okay, so let me give the closing prayer, and then I'll give announcements. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat. That infinite reality is full, perfect, and complete. This relative universe is full, perfect, and complete. From out of the fullness of that infinite reality, the fullness of this world has come. And yet that reality remains ever the same. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all the beings of the universe. So for